Make sure to check out all of our authors on social media. You can find links to their profiles in the description box. Make sure to follow so you don't miss any bookish updates.
So, on today's episode of Wednesdays with Writers, we are not actually sitting down with a writer. This is the first episode where we are talking about books, just like anyone else's books. This week specifically, we're talking about A Court of Thorns and Roses. We're going to talk about the whole series. So welcome back to those of you who watched the previous episodes. This one will be a little bit different. My name is Amy Prokopis. I am the author of the young adult science fiction novel, The Arena, which is back here behind me. My next book, the urban fantasy book, Guardians of the Sixth Gate, comes out in October on Halloween, because I love Halloween. You guys know that. And my guest today is a reader and fellow Sarah J. Maas fanatic, Erika Einfalt.
Hi.
Thank you for joining me.
Thanks.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I met Amy through teaching, which was really fun, and I read her book and it's wonderful. I love it.
Thank you.
I am a military spouse, so there's not a lot to tell that's gonna stay the same. Basically, I kind of just bounce around, and so reading is like the one constant thing I have that I'll always have, and it's great.
And it's a great way to connect with other people too. That's I mean, like, we met through teaching. We were teaching at the same school this year, but we met to like a kind of a large degree from reading the same stuff and posting about it online. So reading connects people all across the world. I have so many book friends that don't even live in the same state as me. And so I understand, like, that makes total sense that would be like the one constant for you.
Yeah. Well, and it's really fun because another teacher that we worked with just messaged me on a Facebook post and was like, hey, can we do this? And it's basically you each pick a book and you read it and write your comments as stuff is happening. And then you ship them to each other and you get to read with your friends' comments in the book.
Oh, that's so
I thought was pretty cool. And so that's also kind of nice because if you do something like that, you can stay connected to people.
That's true. That's a great idea.
Right?
I love that. I might have to start doing that. That's so fun.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So we're going to, in this episode, talk about, we might be a little bit like everywhere. So sorry to those of you listening if we like are a little crazy. Our dogs are also both running around. So if you hear barking, that's what that is. Sorry in advance, but we're going to try and talk about the whole series. I don't have the last book with me. I did read it. I read all of these through Audible, and then I bought the paperbacks because they're so pretty. And the last one's not out on paperback yet, so I can't wait to get it though because it's so pretty.
That's kind of what I've done too. I've done all of them through audiobook.
Yeah.
And that is what got me back into reading while I was teaching, because as a lot of people know, teaching is like an all encompassing.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
That's not your job, that's your life.
No. Oh yeah. So, it's a difficult job and it's really hard to manage time at all. Like, talk about work-life balance. That is always blurred. Yeah. And so that's the same for me. Audiobooks is how I do a lot of my reading because I can read on my way to work, or I used to have audiobooks going when I was like doing some easy grading. Yeah. That was the only way I could really indulge in story. And I guess that's a good place to start because the audiobooks for these, I know we had a whole conversation a couple months ago about the audiobooks because it's not the same narrator throughout all 5 books. And we definitely had some opinions. So
there's like 3 different narrators. And
I think you're right.
So the first lady and the second lady are very similar. They both do a wonderful job. And the way that they tell the story, like sometimes when you talk about fairies and it seems a little like kitschy, but maybe not everybody's vibe. But the way that they narrated the story it added to it. It didn't take away from it. So there's the first lady on the first 2 books, Thorns and Roses and Mist and Fury. The second lady does 3 and 4. So Wings and Ruin and then Frost and Starlight. And then there's a completely different lady for 5, which is the one we have some opinions about. But
that's true. We had a whole
stop me from listening to the book though.
I know. I think I'm with you. The first 2 were pretty similar. I didn't know, I knew something was different when I started the next audiobook, and it sounded a little different than the last one.
Yeah.
But it wasn't so like startling, so different. The last one with oh crap, now I'm forgetting the name of the book. Oh my gosh.
Silverfire.
Yes. The narrator for that one was so different. And at first I was really thrown off by it. It threw me out of the story. It was like I was reading an entirely new world.
It was distracting.
It was a little distracting. I adjusted to it though. And since the last book is not from the same point of view, it's from Nesta. And so once I got it in my head that, this is Nesta. We're not even talking about, it's the same people, but we're not.
And Cassian. It has both.
You're right. And Cassian. Yeah. But once I got that into my brain, I adjusted to it and it was okay. But it definitely took a couple chapters and I had to like reset my brain. It was a little bit odd because it was so different. It wasn't like the first 2 where they tried to keep a similar style between the 2. The third one was totally different. And I don't know. I see the pro and the con to that. On the one side, if you were like the writer and maybe the team deciding who was going to read it, I guess you could say like, it's from a different point of view. We should get an entirely different person to separate it. So I see that, but it was almost too separate that like I lost some of the world at first.
I agree. And I think something that I would have really appreciated is, in Frost and Starlight, it goes, you've got more Reese, you get a little bit from everybody's point of view. I think it would have been really helpful if in Frost and Starlight, they had almost done a switch off. They had the new narrator read.
Yeah. If she had done those 2 or it would have
been a little awkward to do 2 narrators, but I just
do it. And I do
start hearing from her point of view in the second narrator's voice. And then you switch this completely new one. And so like, yes, it's a new point of view, but we do get a little bit of that in Frost and Starlight, which I think the transition could have been a little smoother, but
I agree with that.
I still read it.
Audiobooks though.
It was still a really good book.
Oh yeah. And I did like reading them via audiobook. I will say it felt like every single one of those books was so long though, because you open it up, you'd like download the audiobook and open it, and the first thing it said was like 16 hours, and you go, wow, all the things I could do in 16 hours.
Yeah.
Look at like the actual physical books, and they are long books, but like I'm a quick reader, so when I see this I think, that's like I could finish that by the end of the week. But with the audiobook, oh my gosh, I was reading those for months, which is a fun journey. But I think it can be sort of like off-putting if you're not somebody that does a lot of audiobooks, especially. So I definitely would not download that as like your first audiobook unless you have like a cross-country trip or some type of time commitment. Maybe those would be kind of fun to do that way.
That's what I did when I'm currently out of state, and that's what I did when I went. I had an 8-hour drive and just turned on the audiobook. Except now I'm doing the dramatized audiobooks that are like a story in your head, so it has different narrators for each person. It has background music. Instead of saying she gasped, like somebody gasps.
That's so fun.
And they're good. They are shorter because there's not, blah, 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 blah. Resan said, it just kind of, they take those vocal, I guess, instructions and say the lines with that.
Yeah.
But then you get to like the spicy parts.
Oh my gosh.
It's not
It's
so
not the same.
crazy.
Oh
God,
no.
it's so
'Cause
bad.
that's what like the series is notorious for.
Yeah.
It's for like all of the spicy stuff. That's why BookTok talks about these books, and every time you see like a books I recommend, you always see one of these in it.
Why is it spicy?
Yeah. Yeah, right. So I know you said you were rereading all of them again.
Yes.
So we haven't talked a ton about the first one. The first one is really different from the rest of them. Now that I've like read them all, it's
so I've heard it basically explained as like the longest prequel, or the longest what is it called? The longest preface ever.
It
You know how
yeah, you're right. It sets
there'll be like
the whole...
right before chapter 1, there will be like a preface, and it's you know, like a few pages, and it kind of sets everything up, but then the story starts on chapter 1.
That's a good way of putting it, because book 1, when like now that I've read the whole series and think back on it, book 1 is pretty much entirely background for the rest of the series, because there's not a lot of, I mean, there's some character development. We see I
feel like at this point we should just mention that spoiler, if you haven't already assumed.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
There are going to be an excessive amount of spoilers.
So this is probably, I would say, the point from here on that you might potentially get spoilers, because now we're starting to get into the individual books from 1 on. We've talked about like the general vibes and stuff and our experiences, because we both did the audiobook version. There were times like before I would get into like the next book, I would go back and kind of review from my paperback version, but I read the whole series predominantly from audiobook. And you're doing the dramatized version now, right?
Yes. So I listened to the normal ones. I've finished, they're in 2 parts. So I finished both dramatized versions for A Court of Thorns and Roses. They're like 6 hours each. The weird thing about them too is instead of having like chapter 1, it's like only 5. It's just
like parts,
like 5 or 6 hour long like clips. So it's kind of weird. You don't really know, you don't have a great sense of where you are in the story. You have no idea what chapter you're in. It just goes.
Oh man.
So now I'm almost done with the first half of Mist and Fury. So the second book, I'm almost done with the first dramatized version, and I don't think the second one's out yet. So I'm probably going to have to finish book 2 on regular audiobook, which is fine. I think I enjoyed that narrator more.
Yeah, I liked that second one a lot.
Yeah.
But I think part of that's also because just from at least all of the TikTok content I see on these, most people like this one the most, and some people say this one and the last one. That would be my opinion as well.
I agree.
I agree with you about the first book. It is sort of like a very long preface, because there's definitely character arcs. You see Farah, you already know that she's like, she's a badass, but you already know that she's like sort of an adult in her own right. She is a caretaker. She takes care of her own family because her dad is in this mental place where he's unable to, and none of the other sisters have stepped up.
Physically also, he's physically disabled. Because when they lost their fortune, the debtors came in and just like beat the crap out.
You're right. I forgot about that piece. You're right.
And she holds a lot of resentment for him because of that.
That goes on for a long time. We don't see that come back around in this.
Well, Nesta does too. Like, the only one that doesn't really is Elaine. So she's like a daddy's girl, and she's the middle child.
Elaine is kind of the voice of reason in some ways for that family. The
she's
family dynamic
has a positive outlook. Like Farah is so constantly worried about keeping her family alive, and then Nesta is just bitter. And there's actually been some discussion, like there are people who love Nesta and there are people who hate her, and a lot of people
really not a middle.
A lot of people, but see, I think I'm in the middle.
Yeah,
because a lot of people said that they read the books and they didn't really realize kind of how poorly Nesta treats Feyre or acts around her.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they scrolling through TikTok and whatnot, they saw some other people talking about it. And when they were rereading them, they were like, wow, she treats Feyre like shit.
Oh, big time. Yeah.
I
Big time.
cuss. Okay.
I do. I think a little bit's okay. Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
Oh,
In the first book, when I read the first book, the version of Nesta we see in this very much is that bitter
yeah.
sister that holds a lot of resentment, looks down on their dad a lot despite what he's going through, even though like it's acknowledged in the family. These are the things that have happened. She doesn't seem to take a lot of that in consideration. So the version I saw in the first book of Nesta, I did not like her. And I just assumed from because I'm a writer and I've read enough stories like similar-ish, I just assumed that along the series, something serious would happen to her and she would be like kicked off or take like the wrong side in some battle. As we got into like the fairy world and stuff, I just assumed that maybe she'd go off on like the dark path. But I really liked the arc where we came back around and got some of her insight, and we see more of her perspective, not as being this bitter person, but of being I don't know, in a lot of ways, the way she views the world is realistic and harsh. She sees the harshness of life and the reality that is like the sad stuff. And that would make anyone bitter.
God, yeah.
Oh, well, yeah. I try not to dwell on that side of life too much.
Yeah. Well, and I think, she does have a very obvious redeeming quality that's pointed out very often of her protection of Elaine, like constantly, I don't know how many times it's said, but the number of times that Feyre says it, or it's just said in general that, Feyre knows that Elaine's going to be safe because Nesta would do anything to protect her.
Yeah.
And I think that's another reason why Feyre holds a lot of resentment for Nesta, not only because of how Nesta treats Feyre, but because of how Nesta treats Elaine.
Yeah.
And all of this love and protection, she's like, why don't I get this? What did I do to, have to watch you like dote on our sister and take care of her. And then you send me, the youngest sister, out into these dangerous woods. So I think there's a whole just lot of resentment around that trio of sisters initially.
Yeah. I think it's it's like love triangles, right? Somebody's always going to feel on the outs.
Yeah.
And that seems to be very true with the family dynamic. Although Elaine doesn't ever seem to feel like she's on the outs. Elaine just sees the positive side of most everything. She is a breath of fresh air in this book about such serious issues. Oh my gosh.
Sometimes I
wish we'd see more
oblivious
to
it. Like sometimes I wonder if she is almost like oblivious to it.
I thought that at the beginning of the series, and as we went, I got more of the idea that maybe she chooses
to ignore it.
Yeah, chooses to see the positives, or chooses to work past the negatives and not let them limit or define her. Even though you could argue that Elaine is the most limited by some of their circumstances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even like, spoiler and jumping ahead a little bit, part of me, she does either straight up ignore or is just oblivious to the dynamic between her other two sisters. And part of me wonders if that's why she was made a seer, because, you chose to ignore everything in the past, all the little nuances. Well, guess what? Now you're going to have to deal with everything and be able to see everything. You can't escape it. And maybe that's why she's so just broken and completely out of it in Silverfire. Well, even before that, I guess.
A little before that. We saw some of that at the end of the book before. I think it was hinted at. that, yeah, that there was more.
So that was my like thought process behind Elaine. And because, oh my gosh, I'm so excited because she still has powers. Like there's a whole, I mean, there's so many
places to go with that.
Mass could do. Like she could do Elaine's story. She could do a spinoff on Lucian's story. And then I have so many like.
She could do more with Nesta if she wanted to.
Oh God, yeah. But there are so many like even opportunities for like who's Elaine gonna end up with. I mean, there are like ships out the wazoo. Like
yeah, you cannot escape them. If you're a member or you see anything about BookTok on TikTok, you're gonna see some kind of Sarah J. Maas something along the way, and it will probably be the series.
And I don't know if you've heard this, but I heard a theory, like a fan theory, that the reason that Amarantha is so obsessed with Tamlin is because they were mates and he rejected their mating bond.
Ooh, that would be interesting.
And I was like, oh my God.
That would be super interesting.
Right? Ooh, I would even really love for Sarah J. Maas to do like a prequel where we get to see like the war and like 500 years ago, and then even like
you're right, there's a lot of history
years, because there's so much, and you do get a little bit of it, but it sounds like there's enough drama that you could easily like bring in Tamlin, Rhys's families, like take it from like very young Rhys and Tamlin POV when they were friends, and then on the different sides of the war and all that stuff, because I think that would be really interesting. But yeah, Tamlin and Amarantha being mates is one that I like. It makes so much sense. She holds so much hatred and resentment towards him because he rejected her, that, you know, and they grew up together, him and Amarantha. And so it would be interesting. So that's one that I am like on board with.
What? That would be fun. That would be a fun story. She could totally work that out in. That could totally. Yeah.
So, but then I've also seen one, which I don't really get, but somebody was not thinking that Tamlin and Elaine were mates, because she's already technically mates with Lucian. She just hasn't like accepted that, you know, like bond. But I saw something the other day, and somebody was shipping Tamlin with Elaine. I was like, I don't see it. Have you heard anything about that?
Not really. I don't see it either.
I know, it's weird.
I don't think they quite fit.
So I don't know. We're kind of getting into later books with that, but those were like thing that I was really interested in. So
I guess we could talk about the relationships, because we're kind of drifting into that anyway, talking about Elaine and Nesta. And so the first book is not really, but it sets up the love triangle. The entire first book, we think, because that's what we're seeing. We're getting Farah, and we're down to 10 minutes. We may have to record another half, because we have not like touched the surface.
I know, it's crazy. This could end up being
still have 10 minutes though, so we could do the love triangle stuff.
Okay.
But so we have Farah and we have Tamlin. So we're getting, and we assume that they're it, because that's the way it's set up through the whole book.
Well, and she assumed it too.
And they both do. They both assume that they're going to be like in game, and you don't really see that maybe that's not the case until like right there at the end of the book.
And even then, she still isn't like Rhys's biggest fan. I mean, especially you see at the beginning, like where I'm literally at right now is her, like the first time she ends up in Valaris. So I've just gone through like her almost marriage to Tamlin and her having to go to Rhys's court, and she was not happy about having to go.
Not at all.
Even when she comes back from that week with Rhys, you know, from her
from
they were doing I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically like the tax where the people from the spring court the tithe. That's what it's called. And, you know, she's thinking through everything in her head. And she's like, maybe I'll just wait for like the mating bond between me and Tamlin to like snap into place. Like, we don't need to rush, like, but it's bound to happen, right?
Exactly.
So even well into
on this.
book 2, like probably a third of the way into book 2.
You're right. Before we finally break off. And that's you're right. It's a third of the way in before we finally see her switch, and it's no longer it's no longer Farrah and Tamlin, and it's Farrah and Rhys.
Well, but there's like a transition time where she is not interested in Rhys yet. Like Tamlin, she doesn't want anything to do with him. She's decided she's not going back, but she still sees Rhys as just a friend, you know?
That's true.
But there's like a whole like limbo period where we just get to see like Farrah. And I think it's really cool that Rhys, like, he's known that they're mates since the end of book 1, and he just waits, you know, and he doesn't pressure her.
He was so nice.
Well, and this is another thing that I've seen is a lot of people that aren't a fan of these books, they say it's because it's so obvious and so black and white. Everything Tamlin did is bad. Rhys does everything right. Like, it's too clear cut and not complicated enough. But
I think it's fairly complicated.
I know, that's what I'm thinking, but
so
I can kind of see what they mean.
Maybe that's my point of view though, because I didn't see all of the, I mean, there were times when I went, wow, that's not exactly nice of him to say those things, but I didn't think too much about it until Rhys, like as soon as Rhys was introduced at the end of this book, I went, oh, he's the one, that's the guy, because suddenly everything Tamlin did, I had a different like lens of, and maybe that's because of like, maybe some of that's my relationship experience is showing, because I've been in an emotionally manipulative, emotionally abusive relationship, and they read very similar to the way Tamlin treats Farrah. Like, I'm not going to control everything you do, but I still have my opinions about what you do when you're wrong, kind of thing, you know. Like, you can have your opinions, but you're not going to have the final decision about how this all works. And especially in book 2, we see that Tamlin really did have opinions about the way their courtship was going to go. And suddenly it's not this like romance between two people. It's getting to be more of like an exchange and a power thing. And the court comes in, and then it becomes very obvious that it's not.
Some of that might not just be you like seeing that switch. Some of it might also be Farrah, and like the reason that we're able to see the switch between wanting to protect and being overly controlling is maybe a little bit when Farrah starts to understand and see that, like, it just, we watch her deal with it and deal with it and deal with the protection until it starts to be too much. And she kind of, you know, she goes up this hill, and at the top is when that switch happens, you know, and then we just get to see her rolling down and slowly understanding, and like, you know what I mean? And then it all like culminates at him locking her in the house, and
that was
her power. I cannot wait to see if they do that in a TV show, because
this would make a fantastic series.
Well, they're
we're in the world of like
it in Hulu.
Yes, I do remember that. Yeah, that it's been in talk with Hulu.
But it's been in talk for a long time.
That's true. I think
there was a movie script in 2018. Sarah J. Maas on her Instagram in 2018 posted a picture of like a movie manuscript, like possibly, but then nothing ever came of it. So
that's definitely a thing in like writing in the publishing world. It's actually not really big news for authors to be optioned for movies. It happens super often where movie like those companies, the like producers and stuff, anytime they see something that might potentially be marketable or may make a really good story visually, a lot of times they'll swoop in and buy the rights from authors, because it's not, especially if you go in early enough, it's not as expensive as if you go when they become bestsellers per se. And then you have it to use it if it becomes like an option. And so it's more common than people think for like for books to sell movie rights. They just don't realize how common that is.
Weird. I didn't know that.
I know, it's interesting. You learn something every day. I definitely think, because we've just like touched the surface, I think that we should hop into another Zoom call and record a part 2 if you're down.
I'm down. I'm very down. I feel like we've basically just gotten the vibe.
We've talked about like the big things. We haven't gone into anything in depth, and we've only gotten like halfway into the second book. So I think that we should record another episode, because I actually need one more episode in the lineup, exactly one more episode.
Okay, I'm down.
I think we should make this a 2-parter.
I'm always down to talk about these books.
For sure.
Like, so, it's crazy.
I love this series. I'm with you. I kind of want to reread them. And now that I have the paperback version, I want to actually read them and not do the audiobook. So
I want to do little tabs.
Yes.
Little tabs, sticky notes.
Yeah.
So,
that'd be fun.
Like all the spicy scenes, all of like this is a great quote. And like, I love this part. I hate this part.
You could totally analyze that entire the entire love triangle, where those dynamics switch that we're talking about, that line between, is it emotionally abusive? Is it just, you could see it. It overlaps. That would be interesting. So we only have, it's exactly like a minute left of recording. And when that minute finally goes, it just shuts off the Zoom call. So I think that we should hop off this one and jump into another one. Hi guys, future Amy here. Thank you so much for listening to this episode all about A Court of Thorns and Roses, fangirling about the series with my friend Erika Einfalt. This is part 1. Next week on Wednesday, as always, there will be part 2 to this series. So if you enjoyed listening to us discuss A Court of Thorns and Roses, everything within the series, from relationships, family dynamics, and more, you can catch the second episode next week here with Wednesdays with Writers. Thanks, guys.